What is up, Buffalo Fanatics? Z-Bot here with you, live on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel on a Wednesday morning. And that, of course, can only mean one thing. It is the smoke break. Good to have you in on this hump day morning. About 48 hours into the free agency period, all the deals you have seen come and go over the last 48 hours will become official in just a few hours. 4 p.m. is when all the deals you've been hearing about the last 2 days or so become official, including the plethora of deals the Buffalo Bills have gotten under their belt over the last couple of days. Beane has not been getting many Z's the last couple of nights, and for good reason. He's been adding, he's been subtracting, and he's also been extending. Beane has been hard at work for the last 48 hours. That continued into the wee hours of the night last night with the Buffalo Bills signing Joey Bosa. We got after that right away here on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel, did Rico and I. And it didn't slow down this morning. The Bills adding to the defense once again this morning. If you're just waking up with me, breaking news coming out of Buffalo, another acquisition for the Buffalo Bills defense heading into 2025, and it's another one-year deal similar to that of Joey Bosa. The Buffalo Bills signed defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi from the Pittsburgh Steelers. That comes out about 45 minutes ago, an hour or so. That is the Bills' most recent signing, another addition to the defensive side of things for the Buffalo Bills. It was clear and obvious going into the offseason here that the primary focal point for Beane was going to be addressing the defense. And if there was one specific area in need, it felt like Beane was going to take a look at the most. It was going to be up on that defensive line. He has wasted no time doing so, making now, the third new acquisition for the Buffalo Bills defensive line, this being the most recent. And the Bills adding defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here it is, courtesy of Ian Rappaport, just about, a little over an hour ago from now. And here are the details if you are just waking up and finding out of the latest acquisition that the Buffalo Bills have just made this free agency. Here it is from Ian Rappaport. The Bills are signing D-tackle Larry Ogunjobi to a one-year deal, $8.3 million with $8 million guaranteed. The deal also includes incentives that could make the deal worth up to $10 million. So within the less than 12 hours, the Bills have added Larry Ogunjobi. They've added Joey Bosa. Now, from what I've been reading about Larry Ogunjobi, it's been up and down a bit in terms of what Steelers fans have had to say. You always take that with a grain of salt, of course. Once you lose a player, oftentimes that's when you let your inner bias get the best of you. Oh, we didn't need him back. We didn't want him back, etc. If you're not familiar with Larry Ogunjobi, he's kind of bounced around the AFC North his entire career. Was drafted by the Cleveland Browns back in 2017, spent 4 seasons with Cleveland, then went to the Cincinnati Bengals in 2021, and then just spent the most recent 3 years of his career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he signs with Pittsburgh on a one-year deal back in 2022. They extended him to a 3-year deal. Did not work out the way that they had intended it to. Couple of injuries in the mix there, including last year, a groin injury that, based on what I've been reading, the groin injury, he didn't seem to bounce back the way Steelers fans were hoping that he would after that injury. But prior to that, boomer bust type player, definitely showed signs of being able to flash up front for the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive front, who had struggled last year. Really, outside of TJ Watt, the Steelers were not stout on the defensive front. That's going to be one of the areas you're going to see Pittsburgh try to address the most this offseason, maybe particularly in the draft. And moving off of Larry Ogunjobi is one piece of the puzzle here as they move on. Their quote-unquote trash becomes the Buffalo Bills treasure in that department. So that is the Bills' most recent acquisition. Yet another one-year deal. It's interesting. 2 consecutive one-year deals here. And Brandon Beane, maybe he's in the mindset now of trying to find guys that aren't requiring this massive commitment early on, seeing what he's got out of what he's added, and then potentially addressing it further from there. So what I do like about these one-year deals, especially guys who are as long into their career as Ogunjobi is, now going to his 4th team, having been in the NFL since 2017. The snap count went down somewhat significantly between last year and the year prior to that. But I'm wondering, these acquisitions the Bills are making on the defensive front, is it going to be more of a rotational type situation with these guys that Brandon Beane is bringing in? Is the idea bringing in different guys whose strong suits are in different areas, rotating them based on their strong suit? We'll see what happens. That's kind of how I'm viewing the Joey Bosa situation. Joey Bosa, ton of snaps with the Los Angeles Chargers. And I was taking a look at the comparison between him and Von Miller in that regard. Because as we discussed a little bit last night, if you didn't join last night, we talked in depth about the Joey Bosa addition, but of course we'll have much more to say about that this morning. So Joey Bosa, when looking at the comparison between him and Von Miller a season ago, despite the fact that Joey Bosa was featured in less games than Von Miller, Joey Bosa had a snap count of 457. And then looking at Von Miller, he had a snap count of only 279. So the difference here to me, the big difference between Joey Bosa and Von Miller, there's a few, really. One, you saved $8 million on the cap by letting go of Von Miller. You're also saving 6 years in terms of the difference in age here between the two players. Von Miller, 35, Joey Bosa, 29. But what I also think you're getting out of Joey Bosa here is potentially a different role than he's used to, which might allow him to not only stay healthy, but to potentially flourish. Because Joey Bosa used to playing nearly double the amount of snaps that Von Miller was given the Buffalo Bills. If he is put into the role that Von Miller was given with Buffalo, rotational player coming in on third down, coming in certain situations, not only does that keep him healthier, but is that more beneficial to him as well? Is that more of his type of game? Will he be able to benefit from that style of play in Buffalo as opposed to how he was utilized with the LA Chargers? You know, the way I'm seeing it currently, based on everybody's take on the acquisition of Joey Bosa, it seems to be very up in the air. And the one thing that I had said last night that I think is the most prevalent here is the idea that Myles Garrett was off the table. It's done. It's over. He was never on the table to begin with. Little did we know he was never going to be dealt. Myles Garrett, it seems like he wasn't even being shopped around. They might have been taking calls, right? They might have, they might have been hearing people out, I suppose. But it looks like at the end of the day, Von Miller was after those dollars, and those dollars are exactly what he acquired. Over $40 million. The Bills were never going to be able to get towards that. I don't think anybody was. I don't think Cleveland was going to let anybody get towards that, right? So that's off the table. The idea of trading with Trey Hendrickson or trading with the Bengals to get Trey Hendrickson, man, that sounded great, didn't it? The idea of it actually happening, let's be honest. Do you really think Cincinnati was going to strike a deal with one of their arch nemesis in the Buffalo Bills? The more you think about it, the more it seems highly unlikely. So then it gets down to, okay, well, so what are the Bills going to do? How are they going to address the position? And I'm seeing a lot of people saying, well, Joey Bosa, long injury history, up there in age, he's washed. And my question is, well, would you have rather if Brandon Beane had done nothing? You're getting a one-year deal here, a little over $12 million on that deal. You're seeing what the market's currently paying players at that position, and obviously you have to weigh them on a different scale. There's a difference between getting a Myles Garrett at $40 million compared to getting a Joey Bosa at $12 million. But for 1 year, a $12 million move where I think the risk is far worth the reward just based on that alone. Also factoring in that if he is going to be the successor to what Von Miller was in Buffalo, you're looking at a guy who might be facing less risk in terms of the injury bug that he quote unquote has. I don't think we're going to see him get up near that 500 snap count like we saw him get with the LA Chargers. So Joey Bosa is awfully interesting to me because I'm dying to see how he's utilized in Buffalo. I could be wrong. Maybe Buffalo brings him in and health willing, maybe he does end up being a primary guy, a guy the Bills go through more often than not. But if you're thinking about it simply in terms of releasing Von Miller and then bringing in Joey Bosa, I think the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages in terms of financials, in terms of age. And I also think you're getting, similar type production over the last handful of years here. If we're looking at the last 3 years combined, Von Miller has got 36 games to Joey Bosa's 28. But even though Joey Bosa's played 8 less games, he's had just as many sacks. He's had more solo tackles, more forced fumbles. So the Joey Bosa signing, of course, is the biggest splash signing thus far. It's the biggest name thus far. And I'm awfully excited about it. The Bills had to make a move at that spot. And I had said the Bills got to leave the offseason with either Myles Garrett or Trey Hendrickson. Myles Garrett gets $40 million from the Browns. That's gone. The idea of Trey Hendrickson getting paid similar to that is probably more likely than not. Then you factor in the idea that the Bills were probably not going to find a trade partner in the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's off the table. You look at what's available. You look at what the Bills could pull off financially and what they could potentially get out of that investment. I think there's a lot more to like about bringing Joey Bosa in than not. Looking down at your chats right now, and I'm seeing Brandon Beane is not done yet this morning. Am I seeing an extension of Damar Hamlin in the chat? Let's take a peek. And yes, indeed. Our very own Buffalo Fanatics Twitter account posting this roughly 2 minutes ago. We wanted it, or at least I wanted it, and we got it. An extension for Damar Hamlin has been made by Brandon Beane. Here it is. The Buffalo Bills agreed to a 1-year contract extension with safety Damar Hamlin. There it is. Love this. I think people see that Damar Hamlin was up for an extension, and their immediate thought was, well, I understand, he's been pretty solid for Buffalo. I understand his history with the Bills, right? I get all that. But what the Bills need to improve at the safety position. Just because they extend Damar Hamlin does not mean that Brandon Beane isn't going to be looking to improve at the safety position. It would shock me if the Buffalo Bills did not address the safety position at some point in the draft. I would guess earlier rather than later. I do see with these first 3 picks, the first round pick and the 2 second round picks, a lot of people are saying, yeah, I see Brandon Beane addressing the defensive front, right? Joey Bosa. You bring in Joey Bosa last night. You bring in Larry Ogunjobi this morning, right? You add Michael Hoecht from the LA Rams. Where's the secondary additions? Brandon Beane's adding to the areas we hoped he would. Where's the secondary additions? Well, here's one. You see the extension of Damar Hamlin. And I had always said, just because Damar Hamlin could potentially be extended by Buffalo does not necessarily mean he is going to be the surefire solution for Buffalo heading into the season. And I think the Bills are going to be looking for that as they head into the draft. But to me, at the very minimum, the extension of Damar Hamlin for nothing, if it only comes down to this, to me, it's satisfactory for the amount of money. I don't are the financials out yet? You can let me know. I haven't seen the financials on this yet. Just coming out, of course, just breaking as we're live here. But at the very bare minimum, should you bring somebody in, which you likely will, to compete with Damar Hamlin at the free safety position, at the very bare minimum, you are getting a familiar face who has stepped up for you the last couple of seasons in a backup role. We know that the injury bug has far too often bitten this Buffalo Bills defense, far too often. You can never be too sure. And the idea of bringing a guy in like Damar Hamlin, who obviously knows the defense well, when he was in the starting role and earned a starting role, he played well. I think if the Bills bring in a safety that's able to beat out Damar Hamlin, that doesn't mean the extension was for naught. At the very bare minimum, you're getting depth here. At the worst. At best, he's back into his starting position. I would say regardless of what ends up happening, there is going to be competition at that position. We'll see what ends up coming to fruition based on that competition. But Damar Hamlin extended by the Buffalo Bills. And I think there's more to like there than not, because even if he does not wind up winning the starting role once again in 2025, you got about as good of a depth piece as you could hope for. So once again, yet another move here made by Brandon Beane within the last hour here. He has extended Damar Hamlin, and he has added the defensive lineman out of Pittsburgh, Larry Ogunjobi. So literally within the last 12 hours or so, you've added Joey Bosa, Ogunjobi, and you've extended Damar Hamlin. You can say what you want about Brandon Beane, whether you love each of these acquisitions, these extensions, these releases, whether you love him or hate him. The one thing you can't say about Brandon Beane right now is that he has not been 100% active in doing his due diligence. Brandon Beane has been working. Brandon Beane has been getting after it ever since the light turned green, really. I think if you could weigh it right now, just based on the optics, as we head into this afternoon, when these deals start to get finalized, if you're looking at just the optics themselves, the Bills have had quite a pretty damn good offseason thus far. If you're looking at what the Bills have been able to accomplish in just the last couple of days here, who they've been able to retain, thus far, the guys going into their final year here, every player going into their final year of their contract has gotten an extension outside of Christian Benford, which we feel is coming down the pipeline. And then James Cook, which we've talked about ad nauseum. I just don't see it happening this offseason. Doesn't need to happen this offseason. So if we're ruling out the idea of getting a James Cook deal done this offseason, Brandon Beane's pretty much taking care of everybody in-house. I would imagine Christian Benford's to come. Taking care of everybody in-house. Releases Von Miller, saves about 8.5 on the cap, immediately brings in Joey Bosa to fill that role. We've added to the wide receiver position with Joshua Palmer. We'll talk about that in a minute. We've added multiple players to the pass rush. We've extended Ty Johnson. And we got Josh Allen paid in a generational way. And that's really all happened in the last couple of days here. So, tip of the cap thus far to Brandon Beane, who has been working overtime, and I think up until this point has done a phenomenal job ticking a lot of boxes that were necessary for these Buffalo Bills as we headed into the 2025 offseason here. A couple of super chats to open things up. Richie's kicking us off by saying, these one-year deals tell me that Beane is trying to quietly win the whole damn thing this year while we draft this year and develop new D guys. But if it works out with Bosa, Obi-Wan Ogunjobi stays win-win. And it's kind of back to what I was saying earlier, right, Richie? Nothing wrong with these one-year deals if you can get them. I think we're well aware that the Bills are going into the draft with what would seem to be a defensive focus. Like I keep saying, I'd be stunned if out of those first 3 picks, should the Bills keep all 3, that first-round pick and their 2 second-round picks, if the Bills are to keep all 3 of those, I'd be stunned if at least 2 of the 3 weren't allocated to the defensive side of the ball. And I think one of them is going to be allocated to the front of the defense. I think one of them is going to be allocated to the back of the defense. What order that's in, not sure. Could be depending on how the chips fall, who's best available. Bare minimum, though, if the Bills do keep their top 3 picks, I would be of the firm belief that at least 2 of those 3 picks are going to be designated to the defensive side of the ball. And now you're bringing in veteran presence as well, like you're mentioning, Richie, to help bring the most out of those new acquisitions, while hopefully, as it stands right now, adding to the current regime, helping them get over the hump. And I do think, I got to be honest, I do think that out of all these thus far, I understand The injury history is so hard to look past with Joey Bosa. It's felt like every year he's had some sort of injury. But if you play him in such a way that limits the amount of exposure he has on a weekly basis, and if you play him in such a way that has him healthy for the postseason, when Joey Bosa is on the field, his ability to get after the quarterback is up there with the best of them. Joey Bosa's pass rush ability is up there with the best of them when healthy. And we know what these Buffalo Bills are. These Buffalo Bills are a guaranteed playoff team. At the very worst, to me, they are a 4-seed minimum. The way that these divisions are currently structured. I've said my current timetable right now is at least 3 years before I see the Buffalo Bills having any viable threat in the AFC East. It's going to be about 3 years minimum for me to think that there's going to be a team threatening the Buffalo Bills for the top of the AFC East. The Jets, looks like they're going to be going with Justin Fields at quarterback this upcoming year. Justin Fields, who could not beat out Russell Wilson for the starting job in Pittsburgh. And now Pittsburgh's going to be moving off of Russell Wilson. That's what the Jets have going on. We already know what Miami's got going on. Regardless of how flashy Miami can look on a week-to-week basis, what has that been against the Buffalo Bills? What has that resulted in? Nothing but L after L after L. The Bills have owned no team more than the Miami Dolphins since Josh Allen has become the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills. And then there's the New England Patriots. And I think as it stands right now, the New England Patriots are probably set up for success over the next decade more than perhaps those other two teams who have been more successful than New England the last handful of seasons. But I think with Mike Vrabel in there now as the head coach, I have a lot of respect for Mike Vrabel. I think with Drake May at quarterback, another step this year, showed last year that he certainly looks like he could be their guy. Build around him, spend the amount of money they have available, draft wisely. I could see New England being back in some sort of contention over the next couple of seasons here. But it's not like overnight you're going to be seeing the New England Patriots vying for the AFC East against the Buffalo Bills. And we talked about the AFC West and, Kansas City's current situation. It feels like in the AFC East, as it is right now, it's either staying the same or getting slightly worse. Or perhaps New England, it's getting slightly better, but it's so far down the totem pole that slightly better still does not come close to the top of the league right now. And meanwhile, I look at the NFC West. The Raiders are getting better. The Chargers are only going to get better. Right? Kansas City, we know what they are. But to me, the idea of the Bills losing the AFC East anytime soon, I can't foresee it. So that, at the bare minimum, is going to guarantee you a top 4 seed. Can you have Joey Bosa healthy heading in to the postseason? You'd love to have him be an impact all year long. But even though we enjoy each and every game equally, that's the beauty of football. Every game counts the same. The Bills have gotten to a point now where we know what the regular season is going to result in. The only difference is, can we finally get a 1 seed for Josh Allen? Can we finally get Josh Allen a bye week during wild card round? That's what we're all hoping for. And I think going into this upcoming season, the Bills might have one of the best chances to do it that they've had. But should it not result in a 1 seed, we know what the Buffalo Bills are, and that's at least a top 4 seed. Can they be healthy going into the postseason? They've been remarkably healthy on the offensive side of the ball each and every year. It's the defense that they've had their struggles with. But I look at a guy like Joey Bosa. We bring up injuries all the time. You could bring up injuries when it comes to any player, whether they're a rookie or they're a 10-year vet, whether they have an injury history or they've never been injured before. Every single year, somebody goes down. A big name, a major piece of a team. It's part of the game. So we can't look at this Joey Bosa signing strictly based on his injury history and just assume it's not going to work out. And if it doesn't work out, I ask once again, what was Brandon Beane to do? Not take this swing? 1 year, $12 million swing? I'm all in on it. especially when you factor in the idea of those bigger swings we were hoping the Bills could make or would make, just didn't seem to be in the cards. With one of them not being in the cards for anybody other than the team that held the cards in the Cleveland Browns, which I still can't get over that. I still can't get over that we didn't even reach the 4 p.m. deadline or the 4 p.m. official beginning of free agency before Myles Garrett re-signed a new deal with Cleveland. I would have thought that was going to get stretched out for at least another month, a couple of weeks. Stunned. And I just wonder if it really was a financial play all along, or if he really did want out and the amount of money they offered was just a number he couldn't refuse. I'd be very interested. Either way, strategically, hell of a play by Von Miller, really. Or by Myles Garrett. Hell of a play by Myles Garrett. Regardless of what the intentions were, he wins here. But he does have to be okay with the fact that they're not going to be winning anytime soon. He does have to be okay with the fact that the money he's taking is signing him up to finish his career in the land of mediocrity or perhaps worse. Because I don't see it getting any better for Cleveland anytime soon, and it's really hard to not get much better than what they are. Or it's really hard to get much worse than they already are. But in all likelihood, you're going to be playing with a rookie quarterback. These two rookie quarterbacks coming in Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. There's a lot more questions than I think answers surrounding these guys. They're not sure things. So the idea of Cleveland having this resurgence. But $40 million a year is $40 million a year. You're playing the defensive end position, making quarterback money. I don't know how you say no to it. Clearly, that's what he could not say no to. But for the money spent on a one-year deal to see what you got here with Joey Bosa, man, sign me up for it. Taking a look at some chats here, run it back saying, it's so crazy to see Z-Bot being emotionally abused year in and year out, trying to convince himself that Brandon Beane is cooking right now. What do you want Brandon Beane to do right now? Seriously, what is it? I'm genuine question. What is it that you want Brandon Beane to do right now? Of all the guys up for an extension, of all the guys heading into the final year of their deal, Brandon Beane has extended all of them but Christian Benford, which we all think is coming down the pipeline. James Cook, if it gets done, it's happening next year. So he's taking care of that. He's gotten Josh Allen paid, taking care of that. He's added a proven edge rusher. Yes, I understand that there is injury history there, as we just went over. But based on what was available, would you have rather just passed on Joey Bosa and had acquired nothing? Bank simply on the draft? I had somebody say to me yesterday, what happens when Joey Bosa gets hurt and all we have to rely on is AJ Epinesa and Greg Rousseu? And my response to that is, well, if you don't add Joey Bosa at all, then you're relying already on what you're saying we will have to rely on without Joey Bosa should he get hurt. So you're telling me it's just not worth taking the chance at all? What is Brandon Beane to do? What would you rather him do? I'm genuinely asking because you're not you're not the only one that has this opinion. This is a shared opinion amongst a lot of Bills Mafia. From what I've seen from Twitter, a lot of people satisfied with what's been done so far. A lot of people have been like, hey, it is what it is. I think there's a couple things to consider. One, this free agency class wasn't all that crazy. It wasn't all that amazing. And those players that did seem available that weren't necessarily free agents, DK Metcalf, Trey Hendrickson, Myles Garrett. How likely did it really seem to be? We all wished it was likely. We all hoped it was likely. Retro saying, you could have called for Beane to get fired if he drafted Josh Rosen instead of Josh Allen. Well, I mean, come on. How can we even make that comparison here, Retro? Yeah, if Brandon Beane drafted Josh Rosen, I doubt I'm even uttering Brandon Beane's name right now. If you're asking me if the success of the Buffalo Bills is contingent on Josh Allen, well, then yes, you're 100% correct. But it's not to say that Brandon Beane hasn't done a solid job as the general manager of this team in drafting Josh Allen and post-drafting Josh Allen. As of right now, I guess the question I have to those who are not satisfied up until this point with what Brandon Beane has done up until right now, the morning of March 12th, for those who are not satisfied, at the bare minimum satisfied with what Brandon Beane has done up until this point, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? Because really, nobody's been more active than Buffalo. Buffalo's been insanely active. Insanely active up until this point. Retaining the guys you'd want to retain. Adding guys at positions of need, and we're not done yet. Plus, we still have the draft coming around the horizon. Mike G. Zeba, the Bills just spent all their money on an inconsistent wide receiver and a couple of aging and clearly declining defensive linemen while doing nothing to address the secondary right before the deepest D-line draft in years. Just because they added veteran presence at the D-line doesn't mean they're not going to address it in the draft. I mean, do you really think that the Bills aren't going to spend one of their 10 draft picks on the defensive line at some point, more than likely earlier in the draft than later? Just because what is occurring right now at the defensive line is primarily focused on veterans, players that are well into their career, does not mean the Bills aren't going to be going after that in the draft as well. Because you're correct, it is a very deep defensive line draft. Many people are saying that this draft, it's as deep in the late first round and into the second round as it's ever been. It's wide open. So it's hard for me to imagine that the Buffalo Bills aren't going to be going youth in that department, as well as having the veteran leadership as well. But you extend Greg Rousseu. We'll talk about that for a second. You extend Greg Rousseu, and I think the money that you wind up extending Greg Rousseu for was very favorable for the Buffalo Bills. If you go and look at what Greg Rousseau's contract winds up totaling out to be, not too shabby at all for the Buffalo Bills based on what that position is currently paying. 4 years, $80 million. So you're retaining Greg Rousseu. I think that's a guy that people would much rather keep than let walk. So you're keeping him in that spot. You're going to be drafting at that spot. You're adding veteran presence at that spot. How much better could the Bills have gotten at that spot as of right now, unless they mortgage the entire farm for Myles Garrett, who clearly wasn't on the table to begin with, or traded their soul to the Cincinnati Bengals, who very likely weren't going to be making a deal with the Buffalo Bills in the first place. And let's see if they even end up making a deal with him at all. Trey Hendrickson seemed to make it known that he wants to be in Cincinnati. I know Cincinnati's allowing him to seek a trade, but does he end up finding a trade? We all thought Myles Garrett was seeking a trade. We all thought Myles Garrett was going to wind up somewhere else. Does the rug get pulled out from underneath the Trey Hendrickson idea too? Does he end up staying in Cincinnati? So with that all in mind, I'm just wondering what could be better at the given moment. We still have the draft coming up. Just because the Bills are signing guys like Hoecht, guys like Bosa, guys like Ojulari, it does not necessarily mean the Bills are going to be neglecting that position, neglecting that area of the field in the upcoming draft. If anything, I think it's going to be more of a focal point. Brandon Beane showing you right now how much of a focal point the defensive side of the ball currently is. Now, I do agree with you that the secondary needs to start getting some addressment. Definitely do think we see that in the draft. We did see the extension of DeMar Hamlin this morning, so at least there's that. We'll see what ends up occurring as the free agency period continues to roll on here. But up until this point, I mean, free agency does not, quote unquote, technically start until 4 p.m. this afternoon. And I would argue that DeMar Hamlin, I would argue that that Brandon Beane has been just about as active as any other GM up until this point. Divine coming in with a big time super chat. Divine, appreciate you, my friend. Divine saying, I truly think a lot of people just want the big name. I honestly think getting glue guys like Ojulari, like getting Hamlin back, it's better to not put all your eggs in one basket. Look at Mack Hollins last year, a role player. So Ojulari, it's a good point you make in terms of the glue guy. He was the 2024 Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The one thing I was reading on him that all Steelers fans could agree on is he is a hell of a high character dude, well beloved in the locker room. We know how much that means to the Buffalo Bills, and we know that they'd rather have guys like that than not. And I think that they've shown that time and time again. The Mack Hollins example is a good one. But in terms of speaking on Mack Hollins, I got to tell you, I am bummed to have lost Mack Hollins. Out of all the moves we've made up until this point, Mack Hollins was not one the Bills were able to make in their favor. Buffalo Bills lose Mack Hollins to the New England Patriots, of all teams. I was really hoping the Buffalo Bills were going to be able to keep Mack Hollins around this upcoming year. From what it looks like, I don't know. You guys tell me what your thoughts are on the idea of matching potentially what the New England Patriots gave to Mack Hollins. 2 years, $8.4 million, which could max out at 10.4. I thought the Bills were going to be able to get Mack Hollins back on like a 2-year, $8 million deal. But with money being as tight as it is, priorities, I guess, had to go elsewhere. And Mack Hollins wound up being one of those casualties. When Rico and I had talked about it, I think we had settled on bringing Mack Hollins back for 2 years, $8 million. So that ended up being pretty much exactly what New England offered. I'd be interested to see what, if anything, was offered by the Buffalo Bills to the New England Patriots or to Mack Hollins. But good for Mack Hollins in earning himself a 2-year deal with the New England Patriots for what could be a little over $10 million. For a team like New England that's looking to rebuild, that's looking to get the most out of what they currently have surrounded around their second-year quarterback coming off of injury, a guy who's looking to reinstill what once was one of the more respected cultures in all of sports. And Mike Vrabel was certainly a prominent part of that. And you'd think if anybody's going to be able to get the Patriots back to the Patriot way, it's going to be Mike Vrabel. If you're looking to do that, Mack Hollins, to me, is one of the guys you'd want in the building to help you do that. I think it's a hell of a pickup for the New England Patriots, and it's a bummer for the Buffalo Bills to have lost him. It's funny, we're going to look back. Mack Hollins only had a 1-year run in Buffalo, but was he not one of the more memorable 1-year guys the Bills have had? From the impact on the field, to the barefoot shtick, to the showing up to every game in a different outfit, whether it was Fred Flintstone or didn't he dress up like Oscar the Grouch one time? Mack Hollins was fun to have around. And he was a grinder. Mack Hollins was one of those guys where you could turn on the film and the play could have nothing to do with him. The ball might not even go on his side of the field, and he's up in someone's grill, drilling somebody. And beyond all of that, Mack Hollins led the team in touchdown receptions last year. Mack Hollins was an impactful player for Buffalo up and down the board a season ago. I truly am bummed the Bills lost him this offseason. I would have loved to have seen what the talks were behind closed doors. Because at 2 years, $8.4 million, I don't know. I think when Rico and I had discussed this is kind of the idea that we had came to. But with the Bills being as tight as they are financially, maybe that was just, another $8 million they couldn't spare. But that was one of the names that flashed up yesterday, the departure of Mack Hollins, or 2 days ago, whatever it is now. That really had me bummed. Because not only do I think you're losing impact on the field, which I think you certainly got from Mack Hollins, but you're just losing what felt like a Bills Mafia guy. If you could think of a Bills Mafia type guy, was Mack Hollins not it? Did he not fit the billing perfectly? He's going to be missed. He is going to be sorely missed. And once again, I would have liked to have seen what the conversations were behind closed doors. Was there an offer made? How close was it to that in New England? Were they close? Were they not close at all? I'd be interested to know. It's a bummer to lose him. It's even more of a bummer to lose him to New England, but I understand completely why New England was willing to pay him and why they wanted to bring him in. I think he fits perfectly for New England. Like I just mentioned, you got a quarterback going into his second season. You got Mike Vrabel coming in, taking over for the first time here. They're looking to revamp things. They're looking to reload. If you are in that situation, I can't think of a better guy to have on your squad than Mack Hollins. So totally bummed that the Bills lose Mack Hollins. But where they lose in wide receiver, they end up gaining in Josh Palmer. The Bills acquire 2 Los Angeles Chargers players. Really, they went all in on the LA side of things. They acquired a LA Ram and 2 LA Chargers. We'll talk about Joshua Palmer here. Josh Palmer, one of the areas, of course, outside of the defensive end of things, the one area offensively that we all knew the Bills were going to address this offseason and hopefully continue to address, whether that be further here in free agency, a trade potentially on the horizon, or certainly in the draft. We knew that this was going to be inevitable at some point, and the first domino has fallen in terms of acquiring an additional wide receiver for Josh Allen to target the ball to, and that is Josh Palmer, who has spent his career with the Los Angeles Chargers. One interesting note I found on Josh Palmer that I thought was interesting based on his last year's statistics. From the majority of the statistics, right, you know, you're looking at the average run-of-the-mill type receiver, right? And when we continuously talked about the idea of the Bills adding receiver, especially when the idea came up of potentially bringing in DK Metcalf, we had kind of come to the agreement that while it sounds great in theory, the idea of the Bills paying whatever it might be, $24 million plus on a wide receiver kind of felt far-fetched. I think we had all agreed it was going to wind up being that $12 to $16 million receiver pool, right? And there were plenty of receivers that fell into that. Last year, Amari Cooper was that guy. And it felt like whether or not the Bills end up keeping Amari Cooper or not, we'll see, you know, what ends up happening here. I'm checking Twitter real quick. Keep me updated, by the way, if anything comes across your screen on Twitter, because as you know, today, like the last 2 days, things are kind of flying from left and right. But anyway, it just felt more likely than not that the Bills were going to be picking a wide receiver in free agency out of that pool of guys that are ranging anywhere between 12 to 16, 17 million. We had talked about Davante Adams. He kind of fell into that pool. He ends up becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler, interestingly enough. Or no, that's DK Metcalf, who wound up becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler. That was an interesting move, by the way. DK Metcalf to Pittsburgh. They have no idea what they're going to be doing at the quarterback position, but they wind up going with DK Metcalf, which I found to be interesting. I wonder how George Pickens is feeling about all that. It was like 2 guys who really want the ball. That was an interesting move to me. But it was Davante Adams who went to the LA Rams. So it felt like the departure of Cooper Kupp, bring in Davante Adams, satisfy Matt Stafford, who had felt like he was going to be on the way out the door. They end up keeping Matt Stafford. They bring in Davante Adams, who I still think has tread in the tire. And if you're playing with a guy like Matt Stafford, you're playing under Sean McVay, we could see a resurgence from Davante Adams. But the reason I brought Davante Adams up was because he fell into that pool of guys, right? That 12 to 16 million type range. He was in there, right? Keenan Allen's in there. Of course, Amari Cooper was in there. Josh Palmer is as well. And Josh Palmer winds up being that one guy, at least one for now. We'll see how many it ends up being, but he winds up being one of those guys the Bills draw out of that pool to add to their wide receiver room. And it wound up being right on the nose of that type of money. Josh Palmer, let's get the exact contract up for you. I believe it was 3 years, $36 million. So we're looking at, So we're looking at a 3 year, $36 million deal for Josh Palmer, 18 guaranteed. So you're looking at an average annual salary of $12 million. And that's right around the low end of where we thought the Buffalo Bills were probably going to target in on when it came to wide receivers here in free agency. On the lower end for sure to me. I thought we could potentially see the Bills get up towards that $16, $17 million range. Maybe getting Josh Palmer at that $12 million range allows them to double dip within that pool, find somebody else, not stretch themselves thin on one guy, but perhaps find a way to get two with the money saved on a guy that I thought the Bills might be spending a bit more on. What did Davante Adams' contract end up being for the Rams? Let's see. Didn't he get $40 million? What did he get? Let's see here. What did Davante Adams end up getting? Oh, it was only a 1 year deal, but it was, what is it? No, a 2 year deal? 2 year, $46 million deal. Wow. $26 million guaranteed. His fair market value, I think, before he was signed was like, what, $14 million? So I guess it's right around, and it's right in that wheelhouse, I suppose. But here's the difference. You got Davante Adams going into what, his 12th season of his career? Here's what you got to kind of like about Josh Palmer. Not only are you getting him for the cheaper on the cheaper end of things at $12 million a year, but you're getting a guy that's only going into his 5th season. So you're getting an added much needed wide receiver on the cheap end of that pool of guys we thought the Bills were going to draw out of, and he's only going into his 5th year. The majority of those guys that were in that block of players were primarily veterans that were up there in age, up there in years, that were commanding more money than $12 million a year. For Josh Palmer, going only into his 5th season of his career, having been with only one team. And what I noticed that I thought was interesting about Josh Palmer, beyond just the standard stats where, for the most part, it's pretty in the middle. Average depth of target per route run for Josh Palmer was 7th in the NFL at 15 yards per route. And we know that the Bills have been looking to try and stretch the field. Now, we don't consider Josh Palmer to be that all the way down the field, go up and grab it deep ball type guy, like we're hoping Keon Coleman could become, like we were insinuating that DK Metcalf could be if he were to have joined the Buffalo Bills. But 15 yards per route, average depth per route, 15 yards, 7th highest in the NFL. So you're getting one layer deeper than what you're typically getting from Khalil Shakir, who, of course, has been Josh Allen's primary weapon. Josh Palmer might not be the speediest receiver, and I know that that's what we're all looking for. We're looking for that speedster. The Bills need to get quicker at wideout, and maybe that's the way that they address that ends up being in the draft. We also know that in addition to the draft being pretty deep on the defensive side of things, the wide receiver realm of the draft seems to be quite deep as well. And maybe that's where the Bills look to find their speedster. But I did think out of all of the things that stood out to me the most on Josh Palmer, average depth of target, 15 yards per route, which was 7th highest in the NFL. And pretty damn good after the catch as well. Ranked 14th in the league on yards per reception. So he's a guy that when he does get his targets, they're down the field. It's not air raid hour here, but they're down the field more than I think we're used to the Bills getting out of their receivers as of late. So it seems to be that nice middle ground. We're hoping to find that field extender. We're hoping Keon Coleman turns into that. But it'd be nice to see that next layer deep end up being something that the Bills can implement into their game more than we've seen recently here. And maybe Joshua Palmer ends up being that solution. But I think the biggest benefit out of all of this here is for the money spent here, based on the guys available in that realm, you're getting a guy going into only his 5th year. All of those other guys available, I believe Keenan Allen's going into his 13th year, right? Devontae Adams is over 10 years. We know Amari Cooper's now over 10 years. Going only into his 5th year. And who knows? I always go back to, you always got to go back to, just because Amari Cooper got added last year and the stats didn't go through the roof doesn't mean that guys like John Brown didn't exist. Doesn't mean that guys like Cole Beasley didn't exist. Right? Stephon Diggs, 1,000 yards every year he was with the Bills. Josh Allen, he is a wide receiver's best friend. And I know our most recent memory here of a newly acquired wide receiver that's a household name not having this massive career resurgence with Josh Allen was Amari Cooper. I get that. But Curtis Samuel came on towards the end of last year. Mack Hollins led this team in touchdowns. Mack Hollins, for the most part, was a special teams guy. Led this team in touchdown receptions last year. The Bills are able to get more out of wide receivers than most other teams because of who they have playing at quarterback. And you got a guy only going into his 5th year. And with Josh Palmer, I think you can confidently say that there's potential for the best still to come, maybe than you could other guys. You can't say the best is still to come for Devontae Adams. You can't say the best is still to come for Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper. But you can say the best is still to come potentially for Josh Palmer. Now, he's had some injuries as well in his career, but if you go and look at what he's done with the Chargers, and I understand that Justin Herbert's no slouch, but Justin Herbert's not Josh Allen either. Last 2 years, he was sub 40 receptions. The last 2 seasons, sub 40 receptions. And I have a feeling that the ball is going to be distributed a little bit differently this upcoming year. I don't think the Bills are going to be able to rely as much on Khalil Shakir maybe as they did this past season, because every year, every time a year goes by, defenses adjust. Over 70 catches this past season. What you want from Khalil Shakir is for him to have the same role he's had with this team, but with other guys helping take a little bit of the brunt off of his shoulders in different ways, doing things offensively that aren't necessarily Khalil Shakir's game. Maybe Josh Palmer is that. And you look at the past 2 seasons, less than 40 catches in both years. I think you can confidently say, when you're looking at the guys that could have potentially been available for the Bills to grab up until this point, they have yet to re-sign Amari Cooper. They didn't go after Devontae Adams. Haven't pursued Keenan Allen yet. Guys of that nature. When you're looking at the guys that were available, out of all of those guys, the one thing you can confidently say about Josh Palmer that you can't with the others is that the best years of his career could still potentially be ahead of him. And we've seen it happen with guys in the past. So I think that's the one exciting thing about the acquisition of Josh Palmer here, for sure. By the way, he's going into his 5th season in of his career. What is the age on Josh Palmer? What is he, 25? Yep, 25 years old. And he won't be 26 until the start of the season. So you're getting a 25-year-old wide receiver with only 4 seasons under his belt for $12 million a year. Not bad to me. Especially when you see, I saw a couple of other wide receiver signings that were similar to that of Josh Palmer's. Give you an example here. I think let's see what Tutu Atwell signed. What was his contract with the Rams? So Tutu Atwell just re-signed with the Rams on a 1-year contract at $10 million for the upcoming season. $10 million on a 1-year deal. Tutu Atwell had 42 catches for 562 yards and no touchdowns for the Rams in 2024. We're looking at Josh Palmer a season ago. Only played in 15 games, 584 yards, and a single touchdown. But you're getting him under a 3-year deal for roughly the same amount of money. And I think based on the need at the position, the financials involved, and the age of the player, I like the acquisition of Josh Palmer. And I don't think the Bills are done at wide receiver, that's for sure. Whether it be another acquisition in the coming weeks here, or whether that be in the draft. We shall see. Fireball coming in. He's saying, what up, Z-Bot? Fireball, what's up to you, my friend? Good to have you in. Good to have all you guys in. Nearly 2,000 of you in here with me on a Wednesday morning. One guy we haven't touched on yet that let's get to right now. Another defensive acquisition. And this one's interesting. Michael Hoecht added to the Buffalo Bills roster yesterday from the LA Rams. Another defensive end. He can kind of play a little bit of everything. He's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Michael Hoecht can play all around the interior of the defense and up front. He was undrafted. He's been with the Rams all 4 seasons of his career, healthy. Played in all 17 games of his career. Didn't start in all of them. He didn't really start getting a major starting role until about 2023, but had a big uptick in 2022. Healthy for all 17 games of his career. And his one area of specialties is his run defense. Last year, ranked in the top 20 on PFF. Out of all 211 eligible edge defenders, Michael Hoecht ranked 20th in his run defense grade. And we know that the one area, maybe outside of getting after the quarterback, that the Bills need to improve in the most is that stopping the run. And from the looks of it, Michael Hoecht seems to be a guy that can give you both. And this is what's interesting to me about bringing in these guys that I think have specialties in different areas. You bring in Michael Hoecht, who could potentially give you more in the run-stopping department. You bring in Joey Bosa, who can bring you more potentially getting after the quarterback, right? You bring in Larry Ogunjobi, potentially give you a mix of both. I'm interested to see what the approach is this upcoming season. And I'm also interested to see on how that ends up opening things up for guys like Greg Rousseu, who ends up getting his extension from Beane as well. Amicus coming in. He's saying, Hoecht screams fire zone blitz to me, which is a McDermott specialty. Yeah, so from what I've watched from him, too, it looks like he loves to line up on the left edge in the standing position and get after the quarterback, but real good at stopping the run. And he's one of those guys who's been underrated, I would say, in LA for a defense that's been good for a while. Even last year when they were supposed to have a down year after losing Aaron Donald, we know that they didn't. Defense got a lot younger, but we still know that the Rams defense was pretty damn good last year. Michael Hoecht seems to be one of those underrated guys flying under the radar. I like this pickup for the Buffalo Bills. I think you can utilize him in a variety of different ways. And I think what you're getting out of him, if not for anything else, being able to beef up the run defense is probably one of the main reasons why Brandon Beane looked into acquiring him. So you're kind of adding guys with a variety of different specialties here. And interested to see what the utilization of these guys are on a down-to-down basis. Because if we're looking at the snap count last year for Michael Hoecht for the Rams, he played 639 total snaps. So he was out on the field a ton. Pretty much the majority of every snap. Are the Bills going to be looking to utilize him in a role like that? Or are we bringing in guys that are going to be in more of a rotational type position? And is that why you're going to be benefiting from a 1-year deal from Joey Bosa and a 1-year deal from Ojulari? Not to mention whoever you end up acquiring in the draft as well. It's an interesting approach thus far by Brandon Beane. Is it this massive grand slam hit that we've seen thus far? No. But it seems like the building blocks are being put together, does it not? It does feel like we're seeing a good foundation being laid here. We're seeing the Bills retaining the guys we hoped they would. I mean, outside of Mack Hollins thus far, I'm very satisfied with who the Buffalo Bills have been able to keep on this squad. All we have left, in my opinion, for this year, don't get it twisted, I want James Cook back on this team. But for this year, if we're talking about priorities in terms of bringing guys back, DeMar Hamlin, back. Bernard, or not back, but extended. Bernard, extended. Hamlin, extended. Ty Johnson, extended. Reggie Gilliam, extended. Let's talk real quick about Ty Johnson, by the way. One more of those guys that we weren't sure if he was going to be in the cards in terms of an extension or not. Ty Johnson, to me, one of those underrated luxuries that, not everybody's going to talk about when you're discussing your football team. When you're talking about the Buffalo Bills, you might not bring Ty Johnson up as one of your main talking points. But Ty Johnson, to me, is one of those, if you'd rather have him than not, luxuries. A guy that Josh Allen really relies upon on third down, and I think plays his role perfectly. And there's a reason why Brandon Beane made sure to keep him around. Ty Johnson secures a 2-year extension with the Buffalo Bills. It'll keep him around for the next 2 years. He was averaging 4.9 yards per carry, Ty Johnson. 4.9 yards per carry. That's a guy, when given the opportunity, he takes advantage of it. That's what I love so much about Mack Hollins. It just felt like every time Mack Hollins got an opportunity, he took advantage of it. Feels the same for Ty Johnson. I even go back to that touchdown that he had against the Denver Broncos in the playoffs. Might be one of your only opportunities in the game to make a big play. That catch was unbelievable. Unbelievable. The guy just seems like every time he gets an opportunity, he ends up cashing in on it. And for a team that currently with James Cook, we love James Cook, but his claim to fame is not third down bruiser back. And that's what you get out of Ty Johnson. Plus, you get a pretty damn good pass catcher as well. And when he does get the rock, he knows what to do with it. And he's only, the last 2 years, if you look at it, slightly increased each year. Last year, he was averaging over 5 yards a carry. 4.4 yards in 2023 for Buffalo. 5.2 yards a carry. 2024 for Buffalo. And this isn't nothing new either. When he was with the Jets in 2022, he was over 5 yards per carry as well. But he had 11 more carries last year than he did the year before. He had nearly 100 more yards last year than he did before. Nearly a yard more per carry than he did before. And here's the key. He more than doubled his receptions this past year. He was a viable outlet in the pass game. He had 18 receptions for the Bills last year. He certainly was a sort of Swiss Army knife for the Bills in luxurious situations. Not every team has a guy that you can take off the bench at the running back position and utilize him the way that they do in the pass game and rely on him to get those short yards when necessary. And that's what Ty Johnson has been for these Bills. And I love that they were able to retain him. Because you'd much rather have that luxury than not, wouldn't you? And it feels like based on how they've utilized him, they're so used to having that. It's weird. For a guy that only had 41 carries, it does feel like a lot of their offensive flow does kind of go through Ty Johnson at times. Even though the touches are limited, even though the amount of time on the field is limited, it does feel at times throughout the game, the flow can be dictated whether or not Ty Johnson comes in and executes his role. Kind of weird to think about it like that for a guy that does not see the field a whole lot. But I think that's the kind of impact he has in the role that he does have. So Ty Johnson brought back as well. Speaking of bringing guys back in the backfield, Reggie Gilliam also extended by the Buffalo Bills, and Brandon Beane as well yesterday. Reggie Gilliam agreed to a 1-year extension with the Buffalo Bills on a $2 million deal. So the Bills have shored up the back end of things for right now. Obviously, you got Ray Davis going into his second year. You got Ty Johnson locked down for another 2 years. You got Reggie Gilliam locked up. We'll see what ends up happening with James Cook. I think it's very unlikely we see a contract extension this time this year. I'm hoping this time next year, that's when the Bills are able to get things done. Out of all these deals, I would say, does it feel to you guys, and you let me know in the chat, does it feel like out of all these deals, the Bills lost on any of them? That's another thing I think you got to tip your cap to Brandon Beane here. Not only has he been awfully active, but I think he's been very fiscally responsible too. I think Brandon Beane has come out ahead in the majority of these deals, especially in the Greg Rousseu deal. I mean, I understand Greg Rousseu hasn't played at the top of that position, but getting him under contract, 4 years, $80 million. I thought that was a win-win. I thought that was a win for Buffalo. If you're looking at the current structure of his contract, the highest cap hit he'll have on the Bills' salary, or the highest percentage hit he'll have on the Bills' salary cap until his contract is up in 2030, 6.9%. And if you're looking around the league at that position, the defensive end position, the cap hit that those players are taking off of their team's salary cap, it's massive. Now, I understand he's not Von Miller, or he's not Max Crosby, he's not Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, etc. But you're getting a guy that you drafted who, let's face it, many of these guys seem to get better as they enter into their second contract, seem to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. For the money they got him for, 4 years, $80 million, with 54 guaranteed, the highest cap hit he's going to take throughout his career, remaining with Buffalo, is 6.9%. Based on what Brandon Beane has done thus far, you guys can tell me, has Brandon Beane really lost on any of these contracts? You got one of the better younger free agent wide receivers for about as cheap as you can get a receiver at these days, especially at that age. You got Joey Bosa, a big need in terms of filling the departure of Von Miller, at least for now. You're filling that veteran presence that's departing with Von Miller, getting that for $12 million. You're getting Greg Rousseu, who we're hoping the best is yet to come, for 4 years, $80 million, 54 guaranteed. Largest hit that's going to have on the cap, like I mentioned, is less than 7% throughout his extension in Buffalo. You let Von Miller walk, freeing up that $8 million, and I think getting an adequate replacement in Joey Bosa in the process. And then you add Michael Hoecht as well, who I'm interested to see what the plan is going to end up being with him. But I think one of the more underrated guys available this offseason here that I think the Bills could get real creative with. And they got him on a 3-year, $24 million deal. Only $8 million per year for Michael Hoecht as well. So you let me know. I mean, up until this point, we got a couple of 1-year deals, prove-it deals. Things go well, we'll keep you around. Couple of extensions for guys that we all wanted to keep around. And added to some areas that were definitely needed for money that I think feels just about right for what the Bills currently have going on. I haven't been looking at Twitter, obviously, because I've been yapping over here. Anything of note happened over the last hour or so? Anybody go anywhere over the last hour? Anything new? I saw earlier today that the Kansas City Chiefs restructured Chris Jones and Pat Mahomes' deals, freeing up about $50 million in cap space. What do you think's going on in Kansas City, huh? 50 million freed in cap. It's not very deep. The free agency situation right now is not all that deep. You think this is a future play for Kansas City? You think this is an in-house play for Kansas City? What are your guys' thoughts? Or is there somebody out there right now you think Kansas City is looking to make a move in on, freeing up as much money as they have? Ooh, Mike's putting me to work early here. Mikey G's coming in. Z-Bow, let's hear your top 5 AFC power rankings post-free agency edition. Wow, okay. Give me a second. Let me think here. Chiefs still proving otherwise. Sorry. Hey, you know how much it sickens me to my core to say it, but Chiefs still proving otherwise. Chiefs, Bills, Chiefs 1, Bills 2, Ravens 3. This is where it gets tricky. Man, this is where it gets really tricky. It really is top heavy, isn't it not? Man. I mean, I want to say Cincinnati, but until I see significant improvement on that defense, you know what I mean? The offense was so prolific, but man, that defense is such a sieve. I can't do it. If that defense even improves 15, 20%, I'd put them there. I guess you probably got to go Houston at 4, just because they're pretty much a shoe-in to win that division until they don't. But I just thought that they looked so inferior to Kansas City in that divisional game. Not necessarily the play on the field, but just their overall presence. It just felt like they weren't of that caliber yet, if that makes sense. But I think you got to put the Texans there. I'm seeing you guys in the chat too. Yeah, Texans 4, and then Mike. I'm with you here. I mean, I'm high on Denver. I think I might put Denver in there at 5. Maybe the Chargers, but the Chargers, we were left with such a bad taste in our mouth by those Chargers that it's tough. But the Broncos have an incredible offensive line. I'm high on Bo Nix. I like Sean Payton. They led the league in sacks, I believe, their defensive line. I think I'd probably have to go Denver. Now, Dustin's making a good point here. If Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers, we'll see. I mean, here's my problem with the Steelers. Yeah, you could say the Steelers. You could even say this. You could say the Steelers are 4 or 5. The problem is I know what I'm getting with the Steelers every year until I'm proven otherwise. I know exactly what I'm going to get. I'm going to get a team that's going to win 10, 11 games, make the playoffs, and get their ass kicked. I'm going to get a team that's going to look pretty damn solid in September and October, mediocre at about the midway point in November, below mediocre at the end point in November, mediocre to below mediocre in December, and then losing the wild card. That's what I'm getting from Pittsburgh pretty much every single year. I know that's exactly what I'm going to get. That is exactly what they've been pretty much since Big Ben was at the end of his tenure in Pittsburgh. This is why the Bills need to get a 1 seed, man. They need to get a 1 seed. The ability to be able to dodge one of the two, hopefully, if the Bills can find a way to draw a 1 seed and then hopefully have either Kansas City or Baltimore bow out in the first round, it'd be nice to have an optimal path for once, I guess is the best way to put it. And if you're looking at the divisions right now, other than the AFC South, which is just garbage, the AFC North is far tougher than the AFC East, and the AFC West is far tougher than the AFC East. I mean, say the Browns do hit on a quarterback. I'm not saying that they're going to be a above 500 team, but if they can at least get more competitive, does it get much tougher than the AFC North? The AFC South is essentially a throwaway. You can pretty much pencil in Houston there. I'm starting to think that my hot take before 2025, I've been on this for a couple of weeks now. The more I've been thinking about it, really ever since, not to say Geno Smith is some world beater, but I think there's something to be said about the Pete Carroll hiring in Las Vegas and the trading for Geno Smith. I think there's something to be said about that. I think the Raiders are going to be far more competitive, and they already give KC a tough time. It's kind of like Miami back in the Brady days. They didn't beat him consistently, but it always felt like the Dolphins were always kind of a pain in the ass for New England. It's kind of how it's kind of felt like what the Raiders have been. If the Raiders can take a step forward, I think all these teams in the West are set to take a step forward. I think it's inevitable the Raiders take a step forward. Bo Nix in year 2, I think it's inevitable they take a step forward. Harbaugh with his second year coaching the Chargers, I think they take a step forward. Or at least maintain the same, and that's a double-digit win team and a playoff team. The West is not an easy division. Let me pull up Kansas City's schedule. We already looked at the Bills' schedule, and we already looked at their away schedule, by the way. I mean, once again, I'm trying my best to not sound like a homer, but holy cow, that away schedule is just, I don't know how to, if someone were to lay out like pictographs of like schedules that you could choose from, I would like to think I would choose that one. So here's Kansas City's schedule. And we do got to remember, by the way, as much as I think the away schedule favors the Bills this upcoming season, which it does, Bills did essentially sweep the East last year, with their only loss coming in that throwaway game in Week 18 with their backups in to the Patriots. I mean, that's tough to do. Can they do it again? Because that would go a long way towards really taking advantage of that away schedule. But here's the Chiefs' 2025 opponent list. So at home, you obviously got your 3 interdivisional opponents. And you got Baltimore, Detroit, Houston, Indy, Philly, Washington. Let's compare. Let me get these compared side by side with Buffalo. Okay, so here's Kansas City's. Here's the home slate. Broncos, Raiders, Chargers, Ravens, Lions, Texans, Colts, Eagles, Commanders. So the Bills and the Chiefs both have to play the Eagles at home. Both have to play the Ravens at home. But I mean, look at this. I mean, here's an interesting note for you. Man, I got to tell you, look at that. The Bills' home schedule isn't easy. Does that not look way tougher to you? Not only do you have 3 tougher divisional games, in my opinion, or at least 2 tougher divisional games. You got Baltimore, and you got Detroit, and you got Houston, and you have the 2 NFC champ representatives at home. Now, their away schedule isn't anything crazy either, the Bills being by far their toughest away game. But that home schedule, to me, that's tougher. I would say KC definitely has the tougher home schedule, even though the Bills' home schedule isn't easy either. Ravens at home, Bengals at home. This isn't easy. But they have Washington and Detroit. Bills don't. Interesting. Jim's saying they will be prime time too. Yeah, you're just looking at these Bills opponents. By the way, how many prime time games are on this slate, huh? Good grief. Seeing a ton. Baltimore, KC, Philly, Cincy, Houston, Pittsburgh. They played Pittsburgh on prime time a few times. I think this is the year the Bills get the 1 seed. And we have yet to see how much of a factor that could really be. We've yet to see it. How much of a factor could the Bills getting the 1 seed play into them finally getting into the Super Bowl? They have yet to have that luxury. And it feels like their home schedule is slightly tougher than that of the Bills. So we talked about a bunch of contracts, a bunch of acquisitions. The one we haven't focused in on yet is the contract that Josh Allen landed, which was historic. Josh Allen got, I mean, what a year Josh Allen has had, huh? Eliminated his turnover problem. Wins the MVP. Gets engaged. And now becomes one of the highest paid athletes ever in terms of guaranteed money. Josh Allen just got the most guaranteed money by any NFL player in NFL history. Yes, even more than the infamous Deshaun Watson fully guaranteed contract of $230 million. Josh Allen signs a 6-year, $330 million contract with $250 million worth of it guaranteed. And you know what's so crazy to me? Even though he gets the most guaranteed money in league history, and even though it's $330 million a year, and even though it's signed this year as opposed to last year, based on annual salary average, still making less than Dak Prescott. Josh Allen's contract comes out to around $55 million a year. Dak Prescott's currently at $60 million a year. So even though Josh Allen just signed a contract with the most guaranteed money in NFL history, he's still making less per year than Dak Prescott. And here's who he's currently tied with in terms of average money per year: Joe Burrow, Jordan Love, and Trevor Lawrence. And here are the quarterbacks that are just slightly beneath him: Tua Tagovailoa at $53 million, Goff at $53 million, Herbert at $52.5, Lamar at $52, and Hurts at $51. As crazy as it is to say, Josh Allen at 6 years, $330 million with $250 million guaranteed, the most in NFL history, you could still argue he's underpaid. You could still argue the Bills got a deal on that contract. How crazy is that? If there's ever been a testament to how great a player is, It's that right there. 6 years, $330 million, the most guaranteed money in league history. And you could argue he's still underpaid. And this lumps right back into what I was talking about with Beane a couple of minutes ago. Is there a contract that they've signed this offseason that Brandon Beane's been on the losing end of? I don't think so. So for those who might not be in love with Brandon Beane's done thus far, I don't know how you couldn't at the bare minimum be satisfied with what has been done up until this point, including this deal. That is crazy to me, though. You know how good of a player you have to be to get a $330 million contract and it still feels like it's underpaid? And here's the beauty of it. When you extend that contract 6 years in the making, Josh Allen can continue to restructure that thing and restructure that thing and restructure that thing. And we know he's willing to do it. So not only is he inevitably going to get paid his well-deserved bag, but I do think it sets the Bills up with an ability to continue to extend their opportunity to spend year in and year out to try and put pieces around him. But what a year that Josh Allen has had. What a year. Think about it. Josh Allen opened the year up ranked. Josh Allen opened the year up voted the most overrated player in the NFL. He was also voted the biggest trash talker in the NFL. He'd go on to lead the Bills to win the AFC East for the 5th consecutive season. He'd completely eliminate the turnover problem that all of his biggest haters thought would be his Achilles heel forever. He'd have yet another 40-plus touchdown season. He'd lead the team to the AFC Championship. He'd put up 29 points in that AFC Championship. He'd win the MVP. Gets engaged to the love of his life. And he signs a 6-year, $330 million deal with the most guaranteed money in NFL history. And it just came out as if Josh Allen wasn't winning enough. Apparently, Josh Allen just inked a deal with a media company, Skydance Sports. I don't know if you guys saw this story. It came out last week. This is courtesy of CBS Sports. NFL MVP Josh Allen signs with entertainment production studio. Bills quarterback wants to make content that inspires. Allen signed with entertainment production studio Skydance Sports, where he will develop scripted, unscripted, and branded content with the company via The Hollywood Reporter. Allen said one of the reasons he's venturing into this new field goes back to the slogan he used during his MVP acceptance speech, which of course is be good, do good. What a year for 17. Huh? Dude is killing it. I'm scrolling through Twitter here. Nothing buzzworthy. Nothing of note. Nothing crazy going down since we've gone on here. We did get the DeMar Hamlin extension after we had hit live. Oh, this just in. 3 minutes ago. via Ben Sajak of News 4 Buffalo. The Bills have restructured Ed Oliver's contract. This just in. Ask and you shall receive. I'm over here digging, and I found a little something here. This just in, courtesy of my man Ben. Let me double check here. The Bills have restructured defensive tackle Ed Oliver's contract to save $10.06 million on the 2025 cap. The money is being spread out through the remainder of his deal, plus 2 void years in 2028 and 2029. The room was to make room to acquire Josh Palmer. So apparently this might have already been done. It's just now coming out. Or maybe it's being done right now in order to get that deal done by the time the 4 p.m. deadline rolls around. It looks like Ed Oliver's contract has been restructured to add an additional $10 million to the Bills' cap room for the upcoming season year. So a $10 million saving in a restructured contract on Ed Oliver just being announced here, courtesy of Justin Sajak of News 4 Buffalo. So it looks like that money was being utilized to pay for Josh Palmer, who signed a 3-year, $36 million a year deal. Or excuse me, a 3-year, $36 million contract, $12 million per year. So that pretty much adds right up. So essentially that contract freed up just enough for the Bills to get that deal done. One of the big things I'm waiting for right now, non-Bills related, I'm waiting to see what happens with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. What are your guys' predictions in the comments? Let me know. What do you think goes down with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers? Do you think Aaron Rodgers goes to the Giants? Do you think he stays in East Rutherford? I don't know. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, I don't know. I just feel like I might be more inclined to hang it up than I would be to go play with the Giants right now. There's no way you can go into that situation expecting it to be anything better than what the Jets situation was. The Jets were far better set up for success than the Giants currently are. And what are they going to do? Bring him in to be the mentor for whoever they end up taking? Cam Warner, Shadir Sanders? Is that what Aaron Rodgers wants to do? And then Russell Wilson, where do we see him going? I think Aaron Rodgers' best bet is to go to the Steelers. Then that means, where does Russell Wilson go? Does Russell Wilson go to the Giants? Or do the Giants just say screw it, and whoever they draft, they just throw right out there? Problem is, Joe Shane and Brian Dable are on thin ice, I would imagine. So I feel like they have got to make sure that they're doing everything possible to make whoever they draft work. And thrusting him into the starting role is probably not the best way to do that. So I feel like a veteran acquisition for the Giants has to be in the cards. I think the best outcome for Aaron Rodgers, if I'm him, would be going to the Steelers. At least you know you're competing for something. You could really compete for that division in all honesty. The Steelers were leading the AFC North until what? Early November? They were neck and neck with the Ravens until about early November. Hell, they beat the Ravens last year. The Steelers won 2 games last year where they didn't score a single touchdown. They won 2 games last year kicking nothing but field goals. One of them was against the Ravens. They won what? 15-13, I think it was. I think Aaron Rodgers is still good enough to give you competent quarterback play. And when I say competent, I mean better than the pool of guys that are destined to be backups as it currently stands. How much better is he than Russell Wilson right now? I'm not sure, but I think you could probably argue that he's slightly better. You know what I don't quite get to is the Jets acquisition of Justin Fields. Why not just bring Rodgers back? Is Justin Fields going to be any better than Aaron Rodgers was this past year? I don't think so. Justin Fields could not beat out Russell Wilson for the Steelers' job. And now the Steelers are moving off of Russell Wilson. And then in moving off of Russell Wilson, the Steelers could very well be replacing him with Aaron Rodgers. So then the Jets replace Aaron Rodgers with the quarterback that could not beat out the quarterback that Aaron Rodgers is now potentially going to replace. Make it make sense to me. Make it make sense. I mean, what? I think you're right, though, J4 Allen or Jay Allen. I don't think Aaron Glenn wanted to deal with the circus surrounding Aaron Rodgers. You're probably dead on that. But still, when you just look at it based on how I just kind of put it out there, like it doesn't make any sense at all. It's literally quarterback musical chairs. Literal musical chairs. I would think one of those two guys finds a job this week. Right? I'm reading here from Ian Rappaport about 25 minutes ago. He's saying both Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson have multiple options and are ready for both outcomes. So according to Ian Rappaport, it seems like there are multiple options on the table for both of these guys. And they're just kind of waiting to see what ends up happening here. If I had to predict, I'm going to say Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers, Russell Wilson to the Giants. That's going to be what I predict. I'm less confident in Russell Wilson to the Giants. I don't know why. But if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I feel like I want to go out on a high note. The only way I have a possibility of going out on a high note, I feel like, is if I go to Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. So you can pretty much guarantee at the very bare minimum, you're going to be vying for a playoff spot. You're not going to be doing that with the Giants. And then what other options are there, really? What are your other options? Tennessee, maybe, but still, any of your other options, you're not going to be playing for anything. The only team that has some level of some level of visible competitiveness, some level of something to play for. Is the Steelers. Now, Two Crispy's bringing up the Vikings. The Vikings are interesting. But I'd have to imagine, I know J.J. McCarthy's coming off that season-ending injury, but are they going to want to sit him 2 years? Do they want J.J. McCarthy to not get his first NFL action until year 3? I mean, I understand what you're saying, because the other argument could be, do they want him to immediately come off of a season-ending injury and be thrusted into the starting role? So I do get what you're saying. But it also comes to a point where you got to see what you have as well, even though the injury has to be taken into consideration. The Vikings are an interesting one to ponder on. But if I'm thinking about J.J. McCarthy and I'm thinking about, if I'm running the Vikings, I know you're coming off a season-ending injury, but I also need to see what I have. So even if I do bring somebody else in, at some point, J.J. McCarthy has got to get snaps for Minnesota this year. He has to. Plus, we already saw that Minnesota moved off of Daniel Jones already after taking him in last year, and he signed with the Colts. So maybe that's an indicator that either A, they're ready to bring somebody else in, or they're going to be moving forward with J.J. McCarthy. But if they are looking to bring in another veteran guy, and they are looking to try to win the way that they did last year, then yeah, Aaron Rodgers would make the most sense if that's what they're looking to do. But I also can't see them bringing in Aaron Rodgers as a stopgap. So say Aaron Rodgers gets brought into Minnesota. He doesn't get hurt. He's the starter. Are you just going to ride with Aaron Rodgers the whole year? Are you not going to give McCarthy any starts? So say Aaron Rodgers is playing well. This is the dilemma you face. Are you going to bench Aaron Rodgers if he's playing halfway decent just to see what you have in J.J. McCarthy? Is he going to want to sign up for that? It's kind of like what happened with Kirk Cousins with Minnesota, except obviously financially way worse. But Kirk Cousins gets that huge deal, or not Minnesota, Atlanta. Kirk Cousins gets that huge deal from the Falcons and gets benched for Michael Penix. And now Kirk Cousins wants out. Kirk Cousins is another one, too. But out of that pool there of Rodgers and Wilson, I think Kirk Cousins is at the bottom of that trio there. Apparently, the Browns have some sort of interest in Kirk Cousins, but I had thought maybe the Browns would just bring back Joe Flacco in the meantime to get whoever they end up drafting ready to go. Nick saying Cousins could go to the G-men. That it just seems like that. I could see that. I could definitely see that. And Jeff, you're saying it the best. This conversation makes me so happy. JA17 signed through 2030. I mean, you're not kidding. Oh my God, you're not kidding. Sitting here talking about this, it's dreadful talking about it on the outside looking in. You imagine talking about this from inside the fan base? Oh my God. I could not imagine having to continue to ride this quarterback carousel year in and year out. It's exhausting as just an NFL fan, much less a fan of one of these teams. Oh my God. And we can bitch all we want, man. We didn't get Myles Garrett. We got Joey Bosa instead. Man, we extended DeMar Hamlin. I don't know if he's going to be fit to be the starting safety yet again. I mean, yeah, that, the third. I mean, you imagine us sitting here and we're going back and forth. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers might still have a little bit left in him, but then again, if Russell Wilson can channel his 2015 version of Seattle, maybe we got something. And then, hey, maybe Kirk Cousins, maybe he's got that vintage Vikings, late stint in Washington type game left in him. I mean, could you imagine this? Could you imagine? Yeah, hey, Justin Fields looked pretty good in the 35 snaps he had with Pittsburgh last year. Maybe we could ride with him. Oh my God. It's going to be 2030 at the absolute earliest before we are having this conversation. Thank everything that is holy. I mean, I can't even be, I'm just, there's no words. There's no words. Have you ever just sat back and thought about what half these teams are running through right now? I mean, right now we're sitting back waiting for the fun stuff to happen. Like, we're sitting back waiting to see what new weapon Brandon Beane can get for Josh Allen. We're sitting back waiting for, maybe what that extra piece could be for the Bills defense to get over the hump. And that hump is getting to a Super Bowl. I mean, could you genuinely imagine sitting back here wondering if we could find somebody capable of throwing the forward pass in 2025? And it's this time of the year where you realize it more than ever. Justin Fields could not beat out Russell Wilson for the starting job, and the Jets just gave him $30 million guaranteed. As competent of a quarterback as Geno Smith is, he wants $45 million from the Raiders. So Amicus is saying that Oliver restructure opened up an additional $10 million in cap space. So Amicus, yeah, we talked about that just a minute ago. If you're just joining us, apparently that restructure was utilized for Josh Palmer's deal, which was 3 years, $36 million, $12 million a year. So apparently that restructure was used to sign Palmer. I mean, obviously $10 million added to the cap is $10 million added to the cap. Maybe there's something else in the works based on that restructure. But it seems like that's what that money was used for. But we shall see. It could be something else, like maybe Cooper Kupp. Too Crispy saying, should we have any interest in Cooper Kupp? Jeff is saying the same here. I'll tell you one thing. If people want to complain about injury history like they have been with Joey Bosa, which, is fair. Joey Bosa has had an injury history worth being concerned about. Well, so is Cooper Kupp. The other thing, too, with Cooper Kupp is I think that the style of play is awfully similar to how the Bills utilize Khalil Shakir. I don't know if that's the type of wide receiver the Bills are going to be looking to add, nor should they add. Obviously, I'm always open to adding talent, especially for the right price. And we'll see what happens. I know that Sean McVay somewhat hinted at the idea that there could be a potential return for Cooper Kupp to the Rams now that they officially have maintained Matt Stafford. I don't know how serious that is. But to me, Cooper Kupp is more of the receiver that we currently have in Khalil Shakir, and he's playing at a higher level. I just don't quite know if that type of receiver is what the Bills are looking to add. That's kind of what I liked about this Josh Palmer signing. I think you're getting that second tier type receiver. Not so much the underneath and the intermediate, but that second level. That 15-yard, not the deep threat, not the intermediate threat, but that in the middle type area. The more I think about the Josh Palmer signing, the more I like it, simply because if I factor in what Josh Allen's been able to do for other receivers who were okay with their previous teams and really blossomed with Josh Allen, the idea of Josh Palmer coming in at $12 million a year being only 25 years old going into his 5th year. That has me excited. It really does. I know it's not this Cooper Kupp's a sexy name. Devontae Adams is a sexy name, right? Amari Cooper, when we got him, sexy name. DK Metcalf, massively sexy name, right? I know Josh Palmer, it's not, the glittery item on the shelf, but the more you think about it, the more I think there's a lot to like there. Bills Killer's asking, so did we miss on Coleman since we snagged Palmer? No. Patience with Keon Coleman. Patience with Keon Coleman. Coleman was drafted to be this guy we keep referring to, right? This field stretcher. This go up and get it guy. Out muscle you, out will you, out jump you. Got injured last year. McDermott and Beane have both been on the record saying that they thought that injury affected him more than maybe met the eye. We also know that Keon Coleman, when he was drafted, he was not drafted as a guy that many thought was initially going to be an instant hit. He was sort of drafted as a guy that was going to take time to fully develop into what the Bills drafted him to be. And we have to give him that time, especially after getting injured. And there were pops last year for Keon Coleman. There were pops. To me, the one thing that I really want to see, obviously you want to see progression from Keon Coleman this year, and hopefully that's what we get, and it's what we should get. But what I really want to see this year, I want to see that massive step forward for Dalton Kincaid. That's what I want to see. Because after utilizing a first-round draft pick on Dalton Kincaid, he has really not separated himself from Dawson Knox. I want to see that next step from Dalton Kincaid. When Dalton Kincaid first got drafted, I heard some of the things I heard about him were unbelievable from people inside the league, players who have been around him. Some of the stuff I was hearing about this guy was just off the charts with what they had to say about him in terms of the potential. And I know he played 3 less games last year than he did his rookie year, but I mean, everything was down. Everything, every metric. And I don't know how much of it really is his fault too. I still don't know how much of it is his fault. So often does it feel like there's just not an emphasis on getting them the ball. And everybody's quick to say, well, Keon Coleman bust. There's no way we have a sample size large enough yet to even come close to making that conclusion. Dalton Kincaid's through 2 years now. And I'm not saying the word bust by any means. I need to see the boom, though. I need to see the boom. God, I wish he made that catch against Kansas City. That would have been worth the first round draft pick in itself right there. That alone. Kincaid's my guy, though. Like, if we're sitting here talking about, I really want to see this blossomed year for Keon Coleman. I mean, so do I. But I really want to see that, wow, okay, from Dalton Kincaid. And once again, I just don't know how much of it is on him. Like, it just, I don't really know how to quantify the way I feel about it, because it just feels like when I'm watching the games, there is not this emphasis on creating plays where Dalton Kincaid is the primary focal point, or at least one of them. I mean, look, I understand that the Raiders have far less to work with than the Bills do, especially at the quarterback position. I understand that it's really hard to even make this comparison. And I understand that Brock Bowers was basically the offense for the Raiders last year. But Brock Bowers had nearly as many targets in his rookie season as Dalton Kincaid has had combined through his first 2 seasons. Brock Bowers had 153 targets last year in his rookie year. Through 2 years, Dalton Kincaid has 166. Brock Bowers had 112 catches last year. Through 2 years, Dalton Kincaid has 117. With an additional season, Dalton Kincaid has 5 additional receptions. And I understand it's looking like Brock Bowers might end up being a generational tight end, but I was hearing that Dalton Kincaid was going to be the next thing. I mean, I was hearing Dalton Kincaid was going to be the next holy shit at tight end. And it's not to say he still can't be. But Brock Bowers was drafted to be that for the Raiders. And once again, I'm not unaware of the fact that the reason why his target share was what it was, and the reason why his numbers are the way they were, is because they had nothing else to work with, and they didn't have nearly the quarterback talent. But still, that's my guy next year. Honestly, that was kind of my guy going into this past year. I know he got hurt, missed multiple games. I mean, I'm reading your guys' chats right now. I mean, I feel like you guys see what I'm seeing too. I can't quite tell if it's him or it's just there just isn't this. And this is the other thing too. This Bills offense confuses me in a very good way. I should say in a very good way. When you really get down to it, the Bills offense it honestly really doesn't make any sense. They did not have a 1,000-yard receiver. James Cook, if not for a couple of meaningless snaps against the Patriots in a throwaway game week 18, the Bills would not have had a 1,000-yard rusher. They averaged 30 points a game. They scored the most points in the entire league, playoff and regular season combined. And they had 30 rushing touchdowns and 30 passing touchdowns. It really doesn't make any sense. Here I am sitting here saying, well, in terms of numbers and statistics and, quantifiable production, Amari Cooper didn't bring anything to the table. Keon Coleman didn't show us much his rookie year, and he got hurt. Curtis Samuel didn't show up towards the end of the year. Dalton Kincaid didn't have that boom year in his second season like we were hoping. Led the league in points, 30 points per game. 30 touchdowns on the ground through the air, no 1,000-yard receiver, and we're a throwaway week 18 game away from not having a 1,000-yard rusher. And Jesse, my brother, I mean, you are putting it as bluntly as it should be. I mean, this is Josh Allen. That is what I just said that's Josh Allen. Like, once again, the fact that there was even I understand there was a very, very sound argument for Lamar Jackson to be the MVP last year. But the idea that people were discrediting the notion that Josh Allen not only deserved it, but should have been considered for it. What I just said to you right there, if you can't understand that, if you can't visualize that, if you can't embody that, then I just don't know what you're watching. We're watching two different sports. I mean, if I told some random person on the street, the Bills didn't have a 1,000-yard receiver, barely cracked 1,000 yards on the ground with one of their running backs. Their leading touchdown scorer through the air was Mack Hollins on a 1-year rental. I mean, would your instant guess have been ding, 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 number one offense in the league? Every penny of that $250 million guaranteed is earned, and he's still underpaid. And this is what's so crazy about it. Like, it's so frustrating in a good way, because it's like we almost have the luxury of sitting here and saying, man, we need more from Kincaid. Man, we need Coleman to take that next step. Like, it's luxurious. For other teams, it's a necessity. It's a necessity. You're not going to crack 20 points unless some of these guys do this for another team. I mean, Brock Bowers looks like a generational all-time tight end. He keeps up what he did his rookie year. He's a surefire Hall of Famer. The Raiders could barely win a game. And I guess the frustrating part of it is not that it is. I mean, this is why it really does. It's dumbfounding to me. It really hurts my brain. Because I guess the idea of these guys actually getting to the potential we hope that they can get to, what does that result in? What happens if Kincaid becomes a top 10 tight end? What happens if Keon Coleman becomes a top 10 receiver? I mean, what does that result in? I mean, seriously, what does that result in? The 2007 Patriots? Seriously. Say you bring in Josh Palmer, and he has a career resurgence like Cole Beasley and John Brown did with Josh Allen. Say he blossoms. Say Keon Coleman takes a massive next step, turns into everything we hope he'd be. Say Dalton Kincaid takes that next step. He turns into that first-round draft pick we always thought he would be. And then Josh Allen just keeps doing what he's doing. I mean, what happens? You turn into the Tom Brady, Randy Moss Patriots? I don't know. How much higher can the bar get? You scored the most points in the league last year. You averaged 30 points per game. You didn't lose a game at home. In the game that bounced you out of the playoffs, you scored 29 points in it, and you were a controversial inch away from getting a first down and potentially winning that game too. The Bills' offense kind of makes no sense when you think about it. Josh Allen actually kind of makes no sense when you think about it. The dude's unbelievable. Jesse's saying, what people need to understand is that the more guarantees JA-17 gets, the better it is for the team. Every offseason, if they choose, they can rework his deal and save a ton of cap space. Yeah, Jesse, I don't know if you just hopped in, but that's what we talked about. That's the beauty of it. Not only is he getting his bag, his $250 million guaranteed, but the more years you add on top of the contract, the more you're able to kick that can down the road, and we know Allen's willing to do so. And that's the other beauty of Allen, too. Not only are you getting the best that it gets on the field, but you're just getting like as good as it gets off the field too. On top of it, there's not a day goes by that I just don't sit back and just say, man, what did we do to deserve this guy? And what the hell do we got to do to get this guy what he deserves? At least we got the MVP. That's one down. Paul Costa saying, forget about the Pats are a dynasty, and Iron Mike Vrabel is going to resurrect that dynasty. Look at. I don't know if you were around earlier, Paul, but I said over the next decade here, I think the Patriots are more primed for success than the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins. I said I think it's going to be at least 3 full years until somebody viably competes for the top of the AFC East with the Bills. But over the next decade here, I think the Patriots are better set up for sustained success than the other two. Bills aren't going anywhere as long as 17's the quarterback. But in terms of one of those teams trying to somehow, some way get near that level, now they're not going to get to the dynasty that I think you might be hoping that they do potentially. I can't tell if there's sarcasm involved in that, but I will say I like what the Patriots are doing more than the Jets and the Dolphins. It blew my mind that the Miami Dolphins pretty much got an A+ down the board in every one of those categories on the NFLPA report card. The only takeaway I could take, the only thing I could discern from that was that it's a really fun organization to be a part of, and that's why they ranked so highly in all those categories. Because if winning was top priority, if competing was top priority, I just don't know how you rank out that high. And it was funny how some of the teams that are the best in the league did not have the most glowing ratings in a variety of categories. I mean, John Harbaugh and Sean McDermott got a B, I think, in their grade or whatever. So my only takeaway from that is it must be like a McDonald's play pen over there. I mean, who doesn't love McDoubles and going down the slide and into the ball pit? We all do. A+. Because if it's about competing and winning, I don't know how you're acing the report card. And I do not see what Miami has done to show me that they are all of a sudden going to change who they've been. I have had to have said this 1,000 times on here. If they could not have won it 2 years, if they could not win it 2 years ago, when they had a 3-game lead on the Bills going into December, if they could not win it that year, when are they going to win it? That was it. They had it down to the final game. In fact, the Bills had to return a 98-yard punt in order to win that division 2 years ago. They had them on the ropes. That was the best the Dolphins defense had played the Bills in forever, and they still couldn't do it. They had a 3-game lead, and then they had it come down to single elimination, and they pretty much shut down the Bills' offense the entire game, and they still couldn't do it. And Jesse, you're not wrong. Yeah, the departure of Brian Flores looks worse and worse on the Dolphins every day. Every day. Because as soon as Brian Flores left, it felt like things went like this for him, and things for Miami either just stayed very linear or gradually decreased. Salvi saying, Pats still won't be 500. Dolphins and Jets have no QBs. I don't think 500 this year. But let's see. They went 4-13 last year. I bet you the Patriots could go 7-10 this upcoming season. Would it shock you if the Patriots went 7-10? I mean, the East was so bad last year. Those were 13-4, and not a single winning record from all 3 other teams. By the way, I think I forgot to shout out earlier, new member JTL joining the squad. My bad for taking this long to see you, JTL. Appreciate you joining the squad. New member JTL joining us here on BF. Big shout out to you, JTL. Appreciate you having you on board. Perfect time to join. Right smack dab in the middle of free agency, gearing up for draft time. A little over a month and a half away. Richie coming back in here. Richie saying they should be utilizing Kincaid like Kelsey and KC, and they can. Could the problem be that Joe Brady just doesn't have a consistent plan for him? Problem is Bills have too many good players to throw to. I mean, this is my overall dilemma. I don't know how upset I can be about it. If I can be upset at all. Like, do I want Kincaid to have, like why fix what's not broken? I suppose. And I guess it ultimately comes down to the point of up until it ends up breaking, how can you be disgruntled with the result, regardless of how you get there? Because even if Kincaid isn't going off and even if Coleman isn't going off, like if you're still averaging 30 points and you're still like lighting the scoreboard up. At the end of the day, that is the ultimate name of the game. That's the goal. Who the hell cares how you do it? That's what's so odd when we talk about this and when we think about it. The thing I often ponder is how do you make it even better? And what would that look like? It would virtually look unstoppable. That's what you hope ends up happening. I don't want to see one aspect of the offense get traded for another. I don't want to see like Shakir fall off the face of the earth so that Kincaid can be the new face in town, right? I don't want to see James Cook's touches get diminished so that Keon Coleman gets 50 more targets. Because there's no reason to fix what's not broken. But can you it's like having a car. Can you continuously add to it? New rims. Detail it. Right? Fresh coat of paint. Car's not broken. That thing flies. That thing's one of the most badass whips on the road. Why not make it even cooler, flashier, faster, more durable? I don't know. Anything. Fill in the blank. That's what I'm looking for. Because if and when that happens, look out. And we're hoping that some of these acquisitions on defense allows the Bills offensively to win more games based on what they've been putting out on display. We hope an acquisition like Josh Palmer helps this Bills offense perhaps get to that level that we don't even know exists. And perhaps the continuing acquisitions that we have yet to see, whether that be this week, next week, this month, next month, or of course in the draft. What's it going to look like? That's what we have to look forward to. We got a lot to look forward to. A lot of the waiting game's over. I love this. So we got free agency now. I think a week from today, the first round of the NCAA tournament kicks off. I think a week from tonight, the first round, the play-in games start. So you get free agency, then you get March Madness, which is great. It's my favorite non-football sporting event of the year. Then that takes you right into early April, and then it's prime draft time. And then you draft, right? And then you're into May, and then all of a sudden, doop, 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 doop. And all of a sudden you hear this. Dun, 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 dun. Closer than you think. All right. 2 hours, 12 minutes in the books. I was hoping to filibuster a little bit at the end here to see if the Bills would go out and make some flashy, crazy move, but that has yet to happen. We did get a little bit of breaking news during the show here. We saw the extension of DeMar Hamlin, which was nice to see. We saw the restructuring of Ed Oliver, which looks like that helped get the Josh Palmer deal done as well. And then in the interim of all of that, we discussed everything. We talked about the Joey Bosa signing, the Josh Palmer signing, the extension of Ty Johnson, Reggie Gilliam, Greg Rousseu, the release of Mack Hollins, the release of Von Miller, and, of course, the acquisitions of Larry Ogunjobi as well, which just happened right before we hopped on here, and also the acquisition of Michael Hoecht as well. Brandon Beane has been busy. I hope he continues to be busy, because the second he gets busy again, I'll be right back on here with you. So keep your eyes peeled on your devices. As soon as anything crazy goes down, I'll be back on here with you to dive into the craziness. In order to be notified of that, like button if you could, subscribe button if you'd be so kind as well. Anytime over the next couple of days here, or whenever really, something pops up, we will be right on it. So you'll be manning your phones as much as I will be. As soon as anything goes down, we'll be right back after it. But in the meantime, I can't thank you enough for tuning in on a Wednesday morning. Well over 2,000 of you hanging out on a hump day morning / afternoon. You guys are the absolute best. I got love for each and every one of you, and I look forward to continuing to spend the offseason here with you as we creep through continuously free agency here and crawl ever closer to the draft. But in the meantime, that's going to do it for us here on this Wednesday afternoon. Once again, if you could, like button on the way out, subscribe button on the way out, if you could as well. All right. Hey, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, folks. Hopefully we're on sooner than later, because the sooner we're back on, that means the sooner Brandon Beane's back to work. But until then, enjoy the rest of your day. We'll talk soon. Much love as always. And go Bills.